This is the second in a series of videos in which I'm looking at this HH Tiger computer system. In the first video I stripped it down and it became very quickly apparent that it was in a very poor condition. A lot of corrosion on the components, a lot of corrosion on the main board, a few parts missing. Now I don't own this machine, so I can only invest so much time in it. But I have spoken to the owner about this, and unfortunately he can only invest so much. But from an interest point of view, I did discuss this with him. And when I carry out repairs, I don't charge for my time. I only charge for components that I fit. So he's made it clear that he's happy for me to continue investigating this only from an interest, a historical interest perspective, and see just what would be involved in getting it working, so that if someone wants to have it repaired or take it on themselves, then obviously that would make it a lot easier for them. So what I'm doing is I'm going through it and cleaning it up, checking the various parts. If there's anything I can repair at zero cost, then I'll obviously do that. I don't mind investing time in restoring these, and the first step really in anything like this is to look at the power supply. Power supply is fairly straightforward. It's just got a positive and negative fixed regulator, simple 5-volt regulator. I've been assured that the inductor that would normally have been on the board, there's a position for it on the board, was moved off onto the corner of the case, because this area is directly underneath the monitor and apparently it was causing interference. I was assured this was done at the time of manufacture, but looking at this, it's clear this was done at a separate time. Now, maybe it went back through a second process during the manufacturing phase, but it certainly wasn't fitted onto the case at the same time as the rest of the machine was built. All the wires are different, the fixings are different, but it looks like it was a bit of an oversight putting it onto the board in the position that they have. So far I've removed the modem. So this is the analog part of the modem. Again, I'm assuming these were made in the factory, but they weren't flux washed, and they're in a bit of a poor state even for a machine of this age. So I'll look at this later on if we can get that far. I've unbolted the supply from the chassis. I'll have a look at it, and it's very clear I'm not the first person to have investigated this. There's a lot of work being done on the underside of this, and a lot of it fairly poorly carried out. There's a lot of damaged tracks and a few extra links being put on to correct for that. But what I'll do, I'll clean this up, I'll tidy up the links that have been fitted to the bottom. The main concern at the moment is that I've been checking this to see what's going on. I don't have a schematic or any technical information on this machine at all. So if you do have a schematic or any information at all on these machines, then I'd greatly appreciate you contacting me, so it might make it a bit easier to try and do something with this. What I found so far, looking at the various connections, is that we appear to have what I believe is the plus 5-volt supply, and I verified that by checking on the main board the connector this goes onto, and it is indeed connected to the 0-volt and plus 5-volt rail on the main board. Unfortunately, this connector's corroded completely through, the pins have corroded completely through, and this was just flopping around, so that would need replacing. The rear connector, I believe, is the plus minus supplies for the DRAM cards. If I buzz out the socket this goes into on the main board, it is connected to the pins I would expect it to be on the DRAM cards. So that makes sense. I haven't powered this up, and the reason I haven't powered it up is I always check these before I try powering up, and there is a bit of an issue with this. So if I get the meter out, there are 3 connections on this, and this is obviously the primary for the transformer. And because there are 3 pins and one's taped back, I'm assuming that this is how you do the voltage selection on this machine. These are the 2 pins that were connected to the mains input. We've got a third pin now. If this is a 240 120 volt transformer, then what we'd expect to find is a fairly low resistance across these 2 pins. And if we look at the meter, it's actually open circuit. So I check between these pins and the one that's tied back, and one is open circuit and the other one as you can see is giving us a fairly low reading. That's about what I'd expect, but I have no way of knowing what the resistance of these windings should be. So I don't know if this is indeed a center tap and if one of these is open circuit or not. Now obviously it must be open circuit, otherwise it would read something, but I don't know which of these 3 connections is the center tap. What I intend to do is hooking it up to a current limited main supply, and I'll slowly increase the voltage, measure what's coming out, and see if it makes sense in the context of what this supply is doing. If it is open circuit on the 240 volt primary, then of course this transformer is, to all intents and purposes, scrap, unless somebody in the US wants to buy this. Okay, so I'll do that off camera. A few other things I've been looking at are the, as I say, the condition of the supply. I can sort this out without any real problems. The capacitors don't seem too bad. I have tested those and they're mostly okay. We've got a bit of a leaky one in the center here, but it would still be good enough for the machine to work. So, as I say, first step is to try and figure out what's going on with this transformer. If the transformer's dead, then that's probably as far as I can really go with the power supply, unless I can find a transformer knocking about, but it does appear to have quite a number of secondaries. So my chances of finding one in the parts bin that would exactly match this and this size would be fairly remote. And of course I can't replace this with anything bigger because it simply wouldn't fit into the main case. So that's how far I've got with the power supply. If I can get this working, I'll replace all the rusty screws and nuts with new ones. On the main unit, then again I've been going through this, looking at the various condition of the board, the parts on the board. There are some strange things going on with this. Now, the corrosion that's on this, I can clean off most of it. It looks like it's fairly superficial, and it is only on these expansion connectors. I don't know if there's anything going through these and back into the main board, and whether or not that would prevent the unit from working, albeit maybe these wouldn't all work. There are some broken connections underneath. I have to try and figure out where they're supposed to be connected to. Again, any information would be appreciated. But what I'll do is I'll take this board out, I'll completely clean it. I've been taking out the ICs and cleaning those, and getting the pins fairly clean. Trying to clean the sockets. Some may need replacing. The sockets don't seem as bad as the ICs, so if I can get the ICs cleaned and the sockets cleaned out, then they may not be too bad. So I'll go through all of this, get it all tied up and cleaned. I'll take the cards out before I do that. I don't want to damage these. These actually seem to be in very good condition. Okay, so that's the cards removed. They seem to be in reasonable condition, but they do need a good flux wash. They appear not to have actually been flux washed at the point of manufacture, which is a bit unusual, but that can be done fairly easily. Now, for anyone not familiar with HH Electronics, they were best known for audio equipment, and that does become fairly apparent when you see the types of connectors that they have on the back of this machine and the number of them. It's nice to see that they went to the trouble of fitting fuses to most of the lines, so that should in theory protect the electronics. As I say, next step, I'll get this out, get it cleaned, look at the power supply, and then in the next video we'll see what progress I've made.